Hi guys, it's Sophie. So today I'm going to be doing another review for my Man Booker International 2017 reads. So the third book, and this one is Fish Have No Feet by Kalman Stefánsson, translated by Philip Rofton. Now this book is set in two sort of timelines, both in a town or a kind of village called Keflavik in Iceland. And the reason it's in two sort of timelines is because we follow the timeline of one young man called Ari, and also that of his grandfather who's called Oda. So rather than having like a tri-dimensional generational novel, we have sort of a split between grandparents and children, and the idea is to try and provide some comparison between the life that this young man Ari lives and the kind of life that his grandfather Oda lived. In this very rural community in Iceland. Now we're going to go a little bit over setting to begin with, because setting is a really important part for this book. So as I mentioned, it's a really rural location. It's very bleak, and one of the starting quotes says like, this is the blackest part of the world. So it's all like lava fields and heaths and like mountains that you can't cross over. And it really is kind of a bit of nowhere in Iceland. They mention again and again how no one comes here. And I think the very first quote of the book, because they have sort of quotes throughout, is Keflavik doesn't exist, from Iceland, which I think is like a musical. So it's a very isolated kind of community, and it's a very separate community from a lot of the rest of the world. And one of the things they play with in this book is the fact that this location was set up as a base by the American military. It sounds like it was sort of their like their little sort of hiding space for them, and that they had a number of people there throughout a fairly long period of time. And what that did whilst they were there was that it provided quite a lot of economic sort of stimulus to the people who lived in this town, because they were then getting American imports. They were then having like all these hundreds of people who suddenly flood out who weren't there before, wanting food or entertainment. So the town kind of adapted itself to servicing these foreigners who kind of turned up and enlivened but somewhat took over their town. And a lot of the book plays between this relationship between the American military and the Icelandic people, and how they still felt very like rural and separate, but it was kind of their home, and how the Americans were like, this is hell, this is the most boring, disgusting place I've ever lived in my entire life. And those two kind of differences, and how the Icelanders kind of idealised a lot of what the Americans had and did, because it felt like that was the rest of the world for them. So that element of the book I really enjoyed. I thought the setting was really good. It is a fairly chunky book, so it might be a longer review than normal. And we compare the world of Ari, who is almost post-military, and the world of Oda, who is pre-military. So pre-military, Oda, his grandfather, was a fisherman, and fishing before the military was the biggest industry in this area. But when the military came in, they dropped all the quotas. And fishing was no longer allowed. So that's one of the biggest comparisons between the two sort of historically, is that we have one where the town is sort of struggling by on its own, and one where they've known quite not prosperity, but they've known sort of comfort through this support of this American military, but have now had their fishing quota taken away and the military have gone. So then they have this sort of dearth of unemployment and sort of hopelessness almost in this setting. Now I'm going to save like my thoughts on this for the very end, but I want to go over a few more points first. So setting is a big thing, and I think we've covered that off. In terms of the writing, the language is sort of sparingly poetic, so every now and again you'll have turns of phrase that are really nice and really pretty, but it almost feels a little bit stagey sometimes, because the writing is very, very poetic at the points it is, and it's very, I don't know, I wonder if it might be intentional, because it reminds me a little bit of like some grand history, some like saga almost, in how dramatic it is and how it compares everything to like the sea, a lot of descriptions to do with the sea and sort of rough land, and like there's like a thing that there are three cardinal directions: the sea, the sky, and eternity. So they say that a lot, like there are three ways you can go, like up, like out to sea, or like to the end of forever. Like it's very dramatic, like phrases like that. I didn't mind the writing, but I did actually think that the translation was excellent. So it can be quite hard sometimes, because I don't speak any other languages, to try and pair when a translation's good and when the writing's good. But what I find is I tend to feel that the translation is good when the sentences flow well in English, and when I don't notice so many strange little errors or strange sort of feeling to the writing, and I felt that was near gone in this book. I thought that it felt very naturally in English, which makes me feel like the translation was good. So I think the translation was better than the writing, though I can't really know because obviously I don't speak Icelandic, so maybe the writing originally was absolutely stunning, it's been butchered, who knows. Okay, so we've gone over sort of the setting, we've gone over the theme of like the military, the theme of the economics, the theme of like the barrenness and ruralness of this section, but that in itself isn't a story. Like obviously that's interesting, and that's the bit of the book I actually liked, but that's not the story. Unfortunately, I really didn't get on with this book at all, despite the things I have spoken to up to this point all being things I would have been quite interested in reading about. It's one of the reasons I was so excited for this book. Unfortunately, this was another typically male literary fiction novel. I tend to describe it as like men and their wandering penises, because that seems to be like every other storyline in male literary fiction, and I've read so many of them. Essentially, we have a situation in which a man has cheated on his wife for little reason and is wandering around sort of waxing lyrical about the wonders of having a penis and the wonders of being able to use it, and how beautiful the women are and how mysterious, and just fucking up all the relationships. And it is always just the same very formulaic novel, and I'm just not interested in reading it anymore. Parts of it felt really sexist. There's a section that I put on my Twitter feed that I'm actually going to read you a quote from now, because I was just like, what is this? So yeah, I'll read you that section now. Okay, so Ari, our main character, is looking at an advert of a woman in a magazine. It's an advert for a bakery in Reykjavik. She's holding a freshly baked loaf of bread. Ari stares at the picture, hot and supple, her half-open mouth. For you. Her cleavage is so apparent. She's wearing tight black trousers. His penis begins to stiffen, to rise. That ancient sceptre, it rises toward heaven, to the glory of God. So that's the reason for women being in this world. Their role. So that the sceptre, the symbol of power, the covenant between God and man, the bridge between heaven and earth, can become erect. Why? Yeah, I don't understand. And in my head, I was trying to like rationalise this and trying to be like, why did you write this? And I thought maybe he's just trying to be arty about like how important like a 16-year-old boy thinks like sex is. Like that was the most generous I could be, like with that quote and with other sections of this book that were similarly pretty damn awful. And I told my boyfriend about it, and he was like, no, don't forgive anything. No boy has ever thought anything vaguely like that in the whole of their lives. So I feel as though I've been reliably informed that is just bullshit and sexist nonsense. And there are other parts throughout that are very similar. One of the things that I really disliked about this book, and that I actually found quite hard, is that there are multiple descriptions of violent sexual assaults that happen throughout this book. And we see them from, they're all on young women. They're all told from the perspective of young men. And they are played out, remembered, and sort of replayed as an important part of these boys' childhood, but as a very sexual part of these boys' childhood. And the women's trauma, like the multiple traumas of these women, become something that builds the sexual identity of these young boys. And at no stage does he stop to say like, this is strange. And it just felt really inappropriate to use that kind of an activity to like shape a character. Like it just, whilst I can understand that obviously that kind of thing I would hope would shape someone's life, they saw someone being assaulted, it just didn't feel right. It didn't sort of settle right. The way that it was kind of dealt with, it felt as though this violence woman was like a point of the plot, like an almost like a way of him saying like, oh, look at how nasty men really are, but these boys are slightly different because whilst they didn't help her and they just left her, like they played around with the girl afterwards and kind of were friends with her. And yeah, I just found that really difficult. And I don't tend to like, in general, when there's male writing through a male character of a female assault by men. I find that quite hard, because it's a very individual and strange experience anyway, and to have a female experience very much around men, around the violence of those particular men, told through so many men, just doesn't feel right to me. So that was one thing that did sort of bother me about the book, but there was a number of other things. It's not just this one personal thing. There were a number of other things that just felt not good, and you know, it was the kind of thing where I wanted to read it because it's part of the Mambuka, but I do actually think that quote I read you, had I read that in a book that I wasn't reading to review for you guys, I probably would have put it down, because there's only so much that I can cope with, and like a book that directly says like, is the role of women in the world to like make dicks hard, like that's the kind of book I'm not really interested in reading. I don't care that he put a question mark at the end of that sentence. You shouldn't be needing to write things like that isn't a question you need to ask. So yeah, I ended up giving the book 2 out of 5 stars, but one of the 2 stars is for the translator, because I did think the translation was good, though the writing I read you probably isn't a good sort of description of it, but I did feel as though the translation was fairly good. Otherwise it would have been a 1-star read. So there you are, there's a little bit about Fish Have No Feet. I'm really disappointed because I thought this was going to be one that I was absolutely going to love. So yeah, hopefully I've warned a few of you off of this one. So yeah, there's that one. The next one that I'm going to be picking up, or have picked up, is Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. And I'm going to be reviewing this one for you shortly. I'll try and record in the same setting if I have time before work. Yeah, so this will be the next one, and then I think after that it's probably going to be Black Moses, so there you go, you're getting a little bit in advance. I hope you've enjoyed hearing me talk a little bit about Fish Have No Feet, and as I say, unfortunately it's not a really positive one, but hopefully it's been useful for you guys, and if you were looking to pick it up but feel as though some of the things I've mentioned might make it not for you, then great. If you have read it and enjoyed it, then obviously let me know down below as well. I'm always happy to hear different opinions on books, but yeah, I will see you guys soon in my next Mambuka video, and look after yourselves until then. Bye bye.